Hello, I'm Sean Terry, Secretary of Health for the Muskogee Creek Nation Department of Health. During these trying times, many of our patients and citizens are experiencing behavioral health issues such as anxiety, depression, and others. I'd like to introduce Kyle Sprangle, our Director of Behavioral Health, who's going to give you some tips on how you can help deal with these issues during these times.
Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Sprangle. I'm the Director of Behavioral Services for Muskogee Creek Nation. And I've been asked to kind of talk about some helpful hints or tips that we can do to help ourselves during this extremely anxious, worrisome, fearful time that we're kind of in right now. In simplistic terms, some of the things you might be able to hear and you've probably seen on TV or whatever else, but the number one thing we could all do is actually turn the TV or media off. It sounds very hard to do because people always want to know and they look on the tracker or on the internet or whatever it might be. But what happens is the more you hear that and the more you see that, your brain doesn't turn off. It's still reacting almost in that fight or flight mode. And it's still taking all this information in that has some sense of uncertainty, some sense of fear. And the more you have that going on, whether in the radio or the background or the TV, or you're checking your phone and the internet regarding all that, or it's in conversations that's going on with neighbors and friends and peers, all that is nothing doing, just continue to stir that negative emotional stuff. So the number one thing, you can turn that off. You could check on it here and there, but then turn it off, because the more you fear, the more you worry. We have a lot of data and a lot of information that we were able to gather during 9/11, and I was a clinician working at Children's Medical Center at that time. And one of the hard things when 9/11 happened was everyone left the TV on, and from adults to children in all ages were having all kinds of problems. But when those that listened actually turned it off and went to having normal conversations with each other, and the media was off and the radio was off and they didn't have very many conversations about it, they noticed the anxiety level in the entire house went down. The amount of fear, the amount of worry, the problem sleeping went down. So that's the number one thing, is turn it off. You can check on it every once in a while, but not every 5 or 10 minutes, which is very hard because some of us are so attached to our phones, we're used to checking it every few minutes, and it's one of those things, is turn that off. Another simple thing when I talked about we have that fight or flight response is, it sounds very simple, but breathe. Our lungs are wrapped in muscles. And what our lungs do, we don't realize it, but the more anxious we become, our muscles around our lungs become more tight and more tight, and we breathe more and more shallow. Well, if I breathe more shallow, the problem is my brain is the number one user of oxygen. It has to have that oxygen in order to think clearly, understand, comprehend, finish thoughts, ideas, all that stuff. But as the brain starts to get more and more starved, what happens is that logic, reasoning part starts to turn off, or not be as strong, and the emotional part continues to stay strong because that's part of your core brain. So by doing something very simple, just taking your hand and putting it on your belly, and sleep and almost take breaths like you might hear a little infant do. Because infants, when they breathe, that little belly moves. So practice that slow in through your nose and that slow exhale through your mouth, and do that 3 to 5 times. That only takes maybe a few minutes to do. But every time you take that breath, make sure you're making that hand move that's on your belly, because that means you're getting a full amount of oxygen, which then is doing what? It's feeding your brain and helping you to think about things and understand, and not react as emotional as you may when you start to starve your brain of oxygen. Some of the other things to do is kind of reframing things, or do some relaxation stuff. One of the relaxation things you can do is, some people will meditate. They may meditate on scripture. They may meditate on a poem or something like that, and that seems to really help them. Others will do is called visual imagery, and they'll imagine a vacation spot, or their favorite place they used to go as a kid, or their favorite place they still go to now. Where maybe there was a little brook or a little stream that went by, and they remember that, and watching little leaves float in the water. Or remember a time they went to the ocean and they just sat there and felt the waves kind of coming up on their feet and their legs, and then kind of pulling away, and just looking out for like forever in the water and just seeing the waves and how calming, relaxing that was. Or a time when they just remember after a real cloudy day and going out and the sun just started peeking out and feeling that warmth on their face. And just imagining and putting yourself there, just closing your eyes. What that does is allows your body to kind of go. So in that meditation or that relaxation stuff, all those things are wonderful. And all of us have different images and things like that, or places we've been that they remember they're relaxing. One other thing that's really helpful is also reframing. And reframing is kind of a hard thing to do. In one way, it's kind of reframing the situation. One way to reframe it is, I was talking to a friend of mine about 3 weeks ago, and he came to me and we were talking, and he said, I'm so frustrated. I don't know how parents or teachers do this because I'm ready to expel my kids, and the joke was going, because teachers should get paid millions of dollars for taking care of all these kids and things like that. And I stopped for a second and I said, you have the opportunity during this brief period of time, because this time will come and go, to get some one-on-one time with your kids. The entire world has been turned off. So you're not having to run to sporting events or do anything else like that. You're not having to stay busy and come and go and run and do all this other stuff, because we're not allowed to do most of those things. Said you have time to also turn the teachers off, turn some of the media off, turn some of their peers, because sometimes peers don't give very good advice. And you have this opportunity to feed what you really want to say to your kids, or those things you always want to teach to your kids. You can do that right now. What would you like to do? How would you like to see this as opportunity? Another part of reframing is seeing this as, what memories do I want to have when I look back on when this coronavirus happened? Because, like I said, this will come and go. Do you want the memories of, I was fearful and I was worried and whatever else, and I remember the entire family, none of us got along and we were worried and upset and mad and angry and bickering? Or do I want to look back and say, we created new memories, we created new traditions, we found out turning the world off and actually having some time. We played games more, we rode bicycles, we learned specific card games. Be proactive on some things of some memories you want to have. It's kind of like how you're proactive about, hey, I'm going to take this vacation trip, we're going to go here, and you're proactive and you have certain things you want to be able to do at certain places you want to go. You can do the exact same thing now. It may be we're going to go out front and throw the frisbee, or throw a football, or ride bikes or scooters, or take the dog for a walk around the park, or around the neighborhood, or things like that. Those are wonderful things. Another incredible thing you can also do, and that's really helpful, is to kind of turn the world off, is get into your phone or into your albums. Some of us still have albums, some of us just have all our pictures on our phone. And sit down as a family and go picture by picture and talk about, because sometimes it brings up such good memories. I was talking to one person who called the office the other day and was really struggling, and they said they're really having difficulty turning the world off and turning this fear off. And I said, well, do you have a cell phone? Yeah. Do you take pictures on it? He said, of course I do. Do you have just a few or a lot? He said, I've had tons of pictures. I said, go back to the very first picture you took and start going through with your family and things like that and talk about them. A day or so later, the same person called me back and said, thank you for letting me do that, because we spent a couple hours just talking about the memories and talking about that stuff. And see, that's the good thing, is we have these opportunities to turn that hustle and bustle of the world off and spend time actually reconnecting with family. And when they did that, it was a few hours that they got to share and have wonderful feelings and wonderful emotions and not have worry and fear and anxiety. Another thing that's really helpful is, and this has to do with like chemical things in our head, is when we help others or we do things for others. When I find out how I can help someone's need, my son the other day, I came home and I saw that he was mowing our neighbor's yard. And it's a older lady that lived next door to us. And he said, Dad, I'm not even going to expect to get paid for it. I just want to do something nice for her because I know she can't get out and she can't do it. And she's not going to be able to call anyone to do it because she's probably kind of nervous about that. So we just did that, and then every single day he's been getting up and getting her mail and putting it on her front porch. And then he'd ring the doorbell and kind of run off. He sees it's kind of a fun way of doing things. But every day he has to tell me something, how he did something nice for her. And just his overall affect has changed, and it's letting those good endorphins go, which is wonderful. One of the last things I kind of want to touch on is, and it's a very difficult one, is watch your expectations you may have for others. Because anytime we have, like we have going on right now, we have worry and fear and anxiety and uncertainty going on, what it has a tendency to do is make whatever our negative behavior become worse. So if my negative behavior is anger, my anger gets worse. If my negative behavior is depression, then it gets worse. If mine is worry or anxiety, it gets worse. And understanding this, so when I'm talking to my spouse, or I'm talking to my neighbor, or I'm spending time with my kids, that understanding of their fuses may be a little more shorter. I may get a little more tantrums out of my younger kids. I may get a little more opposition out of my older kids. My wife may be a little more short with the kids or with me or things like that. And it's not intentional. It's just It slowly happens when all this negative stuff, like I said, that worry, fear, and anxiety, uncertainty, when all that happens, it has a tendency to feed and make our fuses worse or shorter. Realizing that helps out a whole lot. So when I go home, I know that my kids, if I ask them to do something, maybe a little more reluctant to do it. And it's not because they're being oppositional, it's because it's just this emotional thing. But the more I'm able to kind of identify some of the stuff and also let them process and then build some good memories, then guess what? Those kind of behaviors and the intensity of those behaviors wane and go down. Last thing I do want to touch on is for those of you have family members or you're struggling with depression, having someone to talk to is really, really important. If you do get to the point where you start feeling suicidal or you just really feel like you need someone to talk, you can call any one of our offices. And anytime during work hours, you will be able to talk to a counselor if you call the office. And then if it's after hours, we'll definitely let you know. We have on our phone message machine the text line or the suicide hotline in case you need someone to talk to at any time. What behavioral health services we want to be able to do is we want to provide whatever services we can for any citizen, any individual that's within our 11 counties, so we can be able to help them and provide the best services we can, and also help everyone while they're in the middle of this, and also as we start to transition out. So the effects of this will be very minimal and not something that's long lasting. I thank you again for spending some time listening to this. I hope it was helpful.
I hope this information was helpful, and if you have any questions, please call our behavioral health hotline number, Mado.